right, everybody, and we are back here on the Fanatic Wrestling podcast. And we are joined this week. I'm very excited to have on Mario Mason. How you doing this week, Mario?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Man, thank you for being on. Really excited to have you here. Jersey guy through and through, a Rutgers guy from, man, even before they had this big explosion. I feel like you were part of that, like, first wave of Rutgers guys that, like, really started to have national success, and they started to build on that to where now they're like a top 10 program. How does it feel looking at that now, knowing that you were such a part of like this program's building up?
It's cool to look at. It's good for Jersey. And I actually went away first. So I went to Minnesota first. And there was actually a couple other guys I would say led the way, like Scott Winston and Trevor Meldy. They were there. And they were, a couple times state champs apiece and really good wrestlers out of Jersey. And then I transferred back kind of in the mix with all those guys. But it was really cool. And we had some good teams. Even though we didn't have any All-Americans, we were ranked, I think, as high as like third, maybe fourth or fifth. We beat, I think it was Virginia Tech at the time, who was ranked really high at home. And we had a big attendance at the rack. It was actually really fun. And now that's kind of just the norm. The rack is packed every single match, no matter what happens. But it was cool. These guys are really, really doing big things now, though. Ashnault and Soriano, and having Donnie over there along with Goody and the rest of the bunch. So it's just really cool to watch and go back and see those guys doing well.
Absolutely. New Jersey is always known as a really tough wrestling state. It's a state where always producing All-Americans, national champions, guys can compete at the world level.
Yeah.
Why is that? What sets New Jersey, as somebody who's very familiar with Jersey wrestling, why is that? Why is it such a hotbed?
To tell you the truth, I'm not sure why it's a super hotbed or anything. Pennsylvania, obviously, right next door, is really tough. New York has been growing and getting tougher as time goes on. Ohio is really tough. So I guess like this area has been known for wrestling for a long time. It's also really densely populated in Jersey. So maybe it's just the people. There's a lot of people per square mile, it's a small place, and there's a lot of good coaches that are on the East Coast too, so, and the access to wrestling now is growing, like we were talking about with Flow. It has grown so much. So, I mean, just high school wrestling, junior high wrestling has gotten better, and just from that stuff. So I don't know about just New Jersey. They definitely have a lot of good guys coming out, but you're seeing it more and more everywhere else now because there's just a lot more access.
Absolutely. I agree so much. And hopefully, I like to think that Fanatic Wrestling is a part of that and can be a bigger part of that.
Absolutely.
Forward. Being able to get that level of information out there. I know when I was a kid, I didn't have anything close to that. So
yeah.
I'm excited about it. When we talk about these hotbeds, you mentioned Ohio, you mentioned Pennsylvania, we mentioned Jersey. I feel like of all of these, Jersey kind of has its own distinct that own spice. It's a little bit more slick. It's a little bit more playful, I guess, in a way. It's not as grinding, I would usually say, like across the board as maybe like Ohio or some of those like Western PA kind of styles.
Yeah, or Midwest as well.
Midwest as well, huge, right? What's going on there in Jersey? Is it just, you guys are trying to impress girls at the boardwalk? Like, why is the slickness coming into play so much? Why the style points?
I always wanted I love shoes, I love wrestling as well, like just the gear side of stuff, and that kind of stuff. I don't know, it just goes with the wrestling. You just want to look good, feeling good, wrestle good, that whole just, I guess, bravo kind of mentality. But yeah, I always wanted to do things that were fan worthy, I guess. Like, you want to do something that looks good and obviously technically sound and all these kinds of things, but it's also fun. You hit something that is nice, it's fun. If you have a good crowd behind you, they were kind of roaring. You were talking about Rutgers, the big crowd, and you hit something slick, it just feels good. I was never a big grinding wrestler where I'm squeezing and collar tying and all those things. So I remember a couple times my dad would be like, why won't you just wrestle and be a little bit more physical? And I was like, well, I'd rather duck him and him fall on his face and then rather than, punch him in the head with a collar tie. I just got more enjoyment out of doing something that was nice and technical and all that kind of stuff.
What's your go-to wrestling shoe?
Go-to wrestling shoe? Probably some combats right now. I got a bunch of old Adidas stuff, but I I like the Kendalls as well, the old white ones, the pearl whites.
I love those Kendalls. I know exactly what
Yeah,
you're talking about.
yeah. I got a bunch of stuff. I love the shoes. I've been trying to work into a little bit of a brand that might be coming out here in a little bit.
Oh, really?
So just a little sneak peek, I guess. But yeah, so we're working on some new things and just having fun with it. Just having fun trying to have wrestling be exciting.
I love that, and I love the idea of making wrestling a little bit more fun. I think that's always really important. What's I know you're coaching now. What are some things that you do to try to implement some fun into the practices and try to build that with your guys and girls?
Yeah, so I always like to jump in. My practices down in South Jersey, we always have net set up, so we're playing a lot of handball before practices.
Standard.
That Yeah, playing handball. Some guys like to play soccer too. I actually really enjoy playing soccer, but I think it's a little more friendly to play handball because not everybody is so good at soccer. I'm not great either, but it's just fun. I like to play. But yeah, I mean, but also just in the wrestling side of things too, like we were talking about, kind of that grinding side. You got to have it, and you need to wrestle hard. There needs to be situations where you're getting pushed. But on the other side, I really do feel like actual play wrestling as well is where guys get a lot of growth from and gain a lot of growth. And I think that's where you see these Penn State guys who are really, really doing things that nobody else is doing a lot of times. And their wrestling is, I would call it like free flow in wrestling. And I would kind of attribute that to how much they like to play and get into situations and never stop wrestling. You get taken down, and then guys will just let you right back up. Versus you get taken down, or just keep playing that position longer and longer, and then you just find other ways to score and you say stretch the wrestling scenarios. But that kind of stuff to me is fun. I don't know about to all the wrestlers, but on the gaming side, you definitely like to have some fun before practices. We've been playing a lot of spike ball actually too before practices. And then, like I said, yeah, just play wrestling and kind of giving the kids a little more free reign to try to feel things out. But it also depends on the kid you have. The more experienced guys are going to be able to think through some stuff with a little less coaching and a little more like, hey, how about you just try this and then just go play? Or just add a little bit and then go play versus guys are a little bit less experienced. We have to teach. You got to teach a lot more just because I have so much to learn.
That makes sense. You got to teach the rules to break the rules, right?
Yeah.
When you're looking at a new wrestler, when somebody new comes in, how easy is it to start to get them on board before? How long usually is that process of let's get you the basics and then you can finally start to play and be a little bit more creative? Is there one set timeline? Is it by the kid? What's the situation?
I would say there's definitely not a set timeline. It could be someone might grow exponentially faster than another. It might be you have a kid who has wrestled in a rec program for a long time, so they kind of know wrestling, but it's just a lot of bad habits that you have to readjust. So, if you just throw them in, and I try to talk to parents about this a little bit sometimes on the live wrestling end, they just want them to beat each other up. Well, but they don't know how to beat each other up. It's like if I jump over into BJJ and like I can wrestle you, but I don't know enough jiu-jitsu to really be able to compete. You know what I mean? Like that's so like we're not going to just go live rolls the whole time because I don't know anything. I need to learn and advance, or at least let my brain kind of think about these things and learn some technical stuff before jumping into that hard wrestling or hard rolling.
When you were wrestling and when you were competing, what is the way that you feel like you learned the best yourself? Was it getting in there and play wrestling and extending the positions like you said? Was it, a lot of repetitive drilling? How did you approach leveling up and learning on the mat?
I'm a big believer in drilling too. I like to drill a lot of stuff like repetitive drilling. But yeah, I would say that I like the approach of, I was working with like a Kendall Cross where he's kind of like, hey, let me get in there and feel it out. Let me see how this feels. Let's make an adjustment and let's play again. and just I think it's good to be structured, but at the same time, especially an advanced athlete, you need time for your own brain to think of possibilities and options and thinking outside, like we were talking about that box, kind of just thinking outside of it, which I think is, again, what those Penn State guys are really doing, I think better than almost every program out there. And I don't know exactly what they're doing. I'm not in that room every day, but you could just see, the way they wrestle and the things they're putting together and how diverse every single guy on their team is. It's not like one structure. Like, it's not like everybody's shooting this single leg or everybody's hitting this one pick. It's like everybody's doing everything all over the board. So that it's a very open-ended kind of workout situation because those guys are just getting better.
So is that something that you ran into a lot when you were a kid, of coaches trying to change your style and maybe make you more of a grinder and less of a slick misdirection type of wrestler?
Uh, yeah, I mean, I went to Minnesota first, so that,
Fair enough.
yeah, I wouldn't say they tried to change it. I think there's a place for all of it. I think there's a time when you need to be able to grind. I think you need to learn how to do it for college wrestling, even if you're not a Big Ten guy. And it's really more about just being in the fight more than anything else, and just having to not give up ground, having to not give up position, and being able to be as conditioned as those guys too, because it's a conditioning factor that your body, you got to teach your body. You can't just go in and wrestle an Iowa guy and never have competed against one of those guys, because you're going to get exhausted just because you're not used to it. So you have to have both sides of it. And you have to, for me at least, I want to have the Okie State and the Iowa, and I want to have, the Penn State and the Minnesota, those kind of meshing together. And I mean, I guess we can obviously throw in a bunch of other schools, but those schools kind of have like their brand of style and that's what I try to do. Like, I want to try and brand myself, my style, the way I move, and try to relate that way to the kids and older guys I'm training too.
So was that the idea when you are coming out of high school, really well-regarded recruit, you decide, let's go to Minnesota? Was that because they can show me the thing I don't know how to do yet?
I think a little bit was that. We also had a really good recruiting class. We had the number one recruiting class. Dustin Slater had just come off of a national title at my weight class. We had a bunch of coaches around my weight, and it was a good situation. It was, but maybe just wasn't the best fit. Like you said, maybe I wasn't supposed to be that grinder or try to turn me into that kind of wrestler. Maybe an Oklahoma State would have been a better fit, or maybe even a Penn State now. Back then, it was not the same Penn State we're seeing now. So it's, yeah.
So let's say I want to start to talk about your series here a little bit, The Art of Misdirection Wrestling by Mario Mason. I think this is a fantastic series where people can really start to crack into some of these footwork and positioning tips that I feel like people might not even notice because they can happen so quickly, but there is a lot of technique packed into this. Do you get that a lot? I feel like that's a common misconception where people think you just move, you just do whatever, and you kind of figure it out in the moment. What do you think about that? Is that fair?
I mean, it's definitely a little bit more calculated than that, but there's always going to be a scenario where you maybe you weren't ready for it, or just it presents itself in a match, because I'm sure you've competed and everybody's going to give you a little bit different look. They're not just going to reach the same way. A collar tie with the left hand still might not look the same way from guy to guy. A stance, a lead leg stance, or everything changes as you're moving, and you have to adapt and then try to. My headphones might die, I'm just letting you know, but I'll unplug. But you kind of have to adjust as you're going. But your footwork has to kind of remain the same, where you're being able to put pressure on, and your hands are got to do similar type things, trying to get guys out of position, and your freeze fakes and your level change, and it's going to change and differ from guy to guy for sure.
What are things that you do? I feel like people in wrestling might not always appreciate footwork as a concept, and how important footwork can kind of be for wrestling success long term, especially in takedowns. What are some things that you do or that you recommend for people to kind of start working on their footwork and get their, get themselves moving easier?
So I do a lot of ladder work with my young guys, and I have some mats actually in my house. We're actually on them. But I have ladders set up. I have cones, and really just drills that I've made up on my own, and just that I used to do on my own, using your stance as well, though. So I don't like to just do the ladders. Of course, for your warm up, you just start getting your feet moving and really just working on that. But then we'll start working into movement through the ladders in our stances. So you're getting used to holding position, but also moving your feet in a fashion that's similar to what we would do when we're wrestling our opponent. So I really like that stuff. And it also kind of changes it up for a young kid. If he's wrestling five days a week, which a lot of guys are doing 6 days a week, a lot of little guys are doing it. I'm not saying that I think it's the best thing, but that's just, they go a little bit overboard. But it changes it up. Instead of just wrestling and pounding every single day, if we're doing some stuff that's a little more athletic, movement based, like Kyle Dake with functional patterns, and he's doing it's movement based stuff, and it's making you more athletic. And obviously the more athletic we are as a wrestler, the better we're going to be. I mean, it's simple as that.
When you use that term athletic, is that something that you can develop, or do you mean athletic just like the way you're born? I want to just ask about that term exactly.
Yeah, definitely something you can develop, 100%. I would say that I'm pretty athletic as a wrestler, just a person in general, but I worked on it a lot. And Jordan Barrows was talking in an interview, and he was like, this isn't something that's natural. It didn't come so natural to him. He had to work on it. He had to work on his movement. He had to work on these things from when he was a kid, and it's the same way. Now, I used to do all kinds. I remember sport training type stuff that my dad would kind of find around our area, and then just working on hand-eye coordination, working on footwork and speed, and just all that kind of stuff, explosive power, and it's definitely something you can develop and learn, and it'll benefit you as well.
So even kid comes into the program, not very fast, not very strong, going to be no problem to be able to show him these movement concepts and get him misdirecting a little easier?
I think so. It'll take some time. Some guys, just like wrestling, just like other sports, it'll be faster than others. Some people just naturally move a little bit better than others, but it's definitely a skill we can develop and cultivate.
When you are dealing with kids, when you're coaching, what do you think is, when a kid comes in, what are some things that you look for to say that this is going to be able to be a kid who has success long term? Is it like personality traits, habits? What are you looking at?
There's definitely personality traits you see in certain guys. And I'd say what I really start to look for first is just position. Like how much position do they actually know? Like it doesn't matter how many moves you know. And that's I think that's a kind of a misunderstanding with some of the young guys and some of the parents who don't understand wrestling so much. Maybe they just got their kids into it. They wanted them to do something that was physical. And yeah, you just really want a kid who is engaged and wants to be there. You can tell when a kid doesn't want to be there if his parents are forcing him in. So that's something I always kind of look for. The kids who are really there and paying attention from a young age, and some of them you just got to look for almost a killer instinct as well. So that's kind of, some kids are a little bit more timid, and it's harder to teach a kid who doesn't want to be aggressive, or you got a guy who's overly aggressive but doesn't know anything about the sport yet, which is probably better than the guy who's super timid, because you can teach the other guy to be very technical and control his aggression and stuff like that. But yeah, there's a huge discrepancy, huge differences between all athletes, and it's fun to watch, and it's fun to kind of be like, all right, this guy might be pretty good, and then that guy who surprises you that you were like, man, I didn't think he was going to be that good at all. You just never know. You never know what these guys are doing at home, how much wrestling they're watching on their own, how much other stuff they're doing to try to be really good.
Did you play a lot of other sports growing up when you were wrestling yourself, or were you did you stick to wrestling?
So as I got a little bit older. When I got to high school, I played baseball a little bit and I played lacrosse a little bit, but I played everything growing up. You know, football, baseball, hockey, basketball, soccer, wrestling. I think I said baseball already. So I pretty much played everything growing up.
What was your favorite besides wrestling? What'd you enjoy?
Probably baseball. I actually really liked hockey as well, but I was better at baseball.
Right on. So, for your series, The Art of Misdirection Wrestling, when people watch this, when they come away from this, what should they learn? As a basic idea, tell people what they're going to get out of this 4-volume instructional series.
So for The Art of Misdirection, the way I started it, we talked about our movement, and your movement starts all of your offense and your defense, actually, if we're going to look at it that way. But movement needs to be something ingrained in your wrestling at all times. If you're moving, it makes you a harder target to hit, and it makes you easier to create motion and pressure into a guy. But the misdirection stuff I started doing as I got into high school. I don't remember who showed me or if I was just watching certain guys, but it really started to take effect when guys started to be nervous when they knew I had a specific shot. So I used to shoot a lot of doubles. I used to shoot a lot of inside reach singles and some ducks and stuff in there too. But if someone knows that you're a single leg shooter and they watch your wrestling or you're in a tournament and they're watching you through the day, I'm going to continue to take that shot. I'm always going to take my first shot because he's going to react. And that's kind of where it all kinds of starts to get into a rotation of, I think I did a lot of A, B, and C, where there's 3 attacks we're using that are kind of interchangeable. But you always want to think about what your number 1 attack is. So if your number 1 attack is a double, I'm always going out and I'm starting to move. I'm setting things up and I'm going to fire my double off. Well, you know what happens when I start firing my double? He's probably going to feed me a hip, which is going to allow me to get to my single, right? So it's a progression of wrestling that it's playing that chess game that to me is the most fun. You know, like I want to stay ahead of you. I want to play that chess game. So I hit my double, maybe I took you down. Then I go out, I'm moving you again. I hit my double again. You feed me hip. I don't score. The next time I hit double, as soon as you move, boom, I change off to my single. You know, and then maybe your third thing, I started going single leg. He starts reacting, and maybe I come back across and I can duck him on the opposite side. But it's a progression of wrestling, and it's fun. It's fun to be like, all right, how can I beat this guy? You know, and really trying to outthink him as you're putting pressure on him, as you're maybe grinding him a little bit and making him, wearing him down and seeing where his hands are going. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much misdirection to me is just being very offensive and being able to fluently mix and match all of your offense and put it together, you know, I guess synchronizing it.
I love that. I love that way of thinking, and I think that's so important to have almost like a systematic way about it, right? Because guys are going to give you pretty reliable reactions, right? You know, everybody is kind of, there's only, you know, if you shoot, a guy's going to sprawl. Well, you can kind of stay one step ahead of that, and I think that's a really smart way. When you started attacking in combinations yourself, how did that affect your results? Did you start having way better results when you how important is it to attack in combination like this, I guess is what I'm asking.
It's really important because if you're really good at one shot and you have a million setups to it, we can stick to one attack. But if you have 2 attacks, you can always use one to set up your next one. And if you watch, I always like to use examples of wrestlers, but if you watch a guy like David Taylor, where it just seems that he just is shooting and shooting and shooting and shooting, and I'm not saying you got to be like that, but he's continuously putting offense together, which means you're always on the defensive end, which means I'm at a better advantage to score. You know, I'm putting myself at risk, but the risk is so I can put points on the board and be entertaining. And that's something my dad always used to say to me. He's like, look, yeah, we got to squeak out some wins here and there, but you want to be entertaining. Like you want to have fun, and it's an entertainment. Like that for me was always something I looked at. Like I don't want to win 2-1. I don't want to try and hang on and stall and squeak out just a 1-point win. And I want to score 10 points. I want to score 15 points. I want to put 30 points on the board. You know, that's something that just was fun. And like Jordan Oliver. Me and him used to wrestle when we were kids. I've known him for a long time, and we would wrestle at events together, and we'd kind of bet each other, like see who could score the most points in the tournament, see who can get like the fastest tech fall, see who could, just things that would try to elevate how we wrestled and to get better and better and better.
Man, that's awesome. I love it. And Jordan's product is also on Fanatic Wrestling. People can go check that out as well. Actually, funny enough, you guys will be on the Daily Deal at the same time this month. So, small world. Yeah. Uh, so everybody wants to score 30 points when they go into a match. How do you train to make that happen? Is it just keeping the training room and just making sure you're always like that whenever you go to practice?
Yeah, I think you have to. I think you have to when you're live wrestling, because if you want to score 30 points, you also need to be in condition to be able to wrestle a lot of positions. Mm-hmm. And keeping that high pace is something that it wears a guy down, and it eventually allows you to score more points if you can wear a guy down and you're putting pressure on him. And just the presence of a guy in your face can get you tired without even touching you, just like him backing you up. And then once you start putting his hands on you, that presence really will get a guy reacting. And that's, again, coming back that misdirection. Every time I start to move, the guy's going to react. He's not just going to stand in front of you, for the most part. I'm sure there's a couple guys who will let you right in and then start scrapping. But for the most part, you start putting pressure on a guy in a certain fashion, he's going to react. And being able to do that from the start of practice until the end of practice is not that easy. If you're especially wrestling a good live day. And that's something I did learn in Minnesota. I didn't do a great job of it, but what I did learn is they always would tell me, hey, you need to wrestle as hard as you can from the first whistle. I don't care if we're doing an hour live go. If you have to crawl off the mat because you're so beat, he's like, I need you to get as tired as you can. I can't remember which coach it was. It might have been Coach Becker or Coach Lawrence at the time. And just from minute one, you need to go balls to the wall looking to score. If you get exhausted and you die out there, it's okay. It's practice. It doesn't matter. But you gotta kind of put your pride to the side, because you might get taken down by someone who never scored a single point on you. But it's because I'm trying to work on the mental side of things. I'm trying to work on the conditioning side of things, and really just, like you said, pushing the pace the whole time in practice. And that doesn't mean you got to be, a guy who's squeezing on you and being, I guess I would just kind of mean about it, but just pushing the pace and wrestling hard.
As a misdirection guy, you're obviously setting a lot of traps, I would say, where you're kind of getting guys into position. Does that require a lot of thinking in the match, in the moment, or are you kind of able to still hit that autopilot where you're operating off of reaction time?
It's a little bit of both. I definitely think there's a sense of that autopilot, or like that flow state people will start to talk about, and that's just from repetition of drilling and wrestling a lot of different people. So you're seeing these reactions over and over. But at the higher level, most of the guys know each other, and the guy you're going to wrestle, oh, he's a righty lead, he shoots a single here. I mean, it's a matter of if you can stop it or not, but you kind of have an idea of what your opponents, or what you're looking at for your opponents. But then that flow state kind of kicks in, where your reaction time and your training during your practices is going to definitely kick on, if you're having a good day.
You've brought up a couple of different USA Wrestling athletes. So you're obviously somebody that watches a lot of video and watches a lot of tape on people, right?
Yeah, I love it. I really do.
So let's talk about this. When you sit down to watch tape on somebody, what are the things that you're looking for? How should somebody, if they have a videotape and they want to pick up something from an athlete, how should they watch that film?
So I do it in two ways. So when I was competing, it was always, how do I beat this guy? What do I have to do? Or at least in theory, what do I think I need to do to wrestle my match against this guy? So that was always when I was competing. Now I'm not competing anymore. I just finished up my competitive career, and I'm always just looking to add to my repertoire of knowledge. So I'm always trying to see, oh, this is really good, I can add it. This is really good, but I don't know, I got to play with it. And for an athlete that is training and competing, I really like the approach of, all right, how do I beat this guy? What do I have to do? What do I have to control a certain hand? Is he controlling a certain hand? Is he this lead leg? He's taking this shot. His position, he comes out of position in this type of scenario. At the end of the match, he's fading. Like this. There's all these things I'm looking at, because in an actual match, it's in real time. You have 6 minutes in freestyle, 6 minutes, 7 minutes in college. In real time, you only have that amount of time to figure a guy out and try to win the match. So if every time you watch somebody, like specifically, you're like, all right, how do I beat him? From start of the match, I'm already thinking about, all right, he's a lead leg, he's a righty, he reaches with this hand, he's doing these things. So I'm trying to pick up all these tendencies really quickly, because when I am actually in a match, my mid-match adjustments will be faster. And, I actually talked about that in my podcast a little bit when we're talking about just analyzing film. And I really, really love that aspect of it. And I had a coach when I was young who had a lot of Russian on film and Cubans on film and some of the Japanese guys. So I've been watching film since I was really young when I started wrestling. So,
who are some of your favorite guys from that era, from the previous era to watch?
So we can go back. Probably my favorite two guys are Elbrus Tadiev from Ukraine, and then Takahiro Wada from Japan. They actually wrestled in the World Finals in, I think, 95. I watched a lot of John Smith. I watched a ton of some of these. He's a 2012 Olympic champ. His name is Tatsuhiro Yonemitsu. Some of the Iranians, some older Iranians, Ali Raza Dabir, I think it is.
That's funny, because Iran has such a pressure style.
Yeah.
So for you to be watching them, I think that's funny.
Well, that's the thing. I try to absorb as much as I can. I try to see as much as I can. I think there is value in learning from all different styles, all different fields. And I can go on a list of a bunch of guys I like to watch. Batiros and Murtalayev, and then some of these other guys from Russia that are phenomenal. And obviously, all the guys we got in the U.S. right now are just unbelievable.
Who are some of your favorite domestic wrestlers? Let's say this. How about this? Who are some of the guys you watch and you think that their misdirection is great? Who are some of the really, really good misdirection wrestlers in the country right now?
In the U.S.?
Sure.
I think David Taylor is actually really good at it. Because he's firing so many attacks at you. He's always looking to hit both sides, but he shoots with both hands. I think Jordan Oliver is pretty good at him too. He's pretty slick with it. And we watched a match of his with Molinaro where he's really faking this high crotch, and he's faking him so bad and bangs him on a single back to the left side. Yeah. And it carries over actually into another match that you could see Molinaro was still a little bit tentative, and he gets him on the same exact setup, faking and into that shot. But again, it's coming off of shooting that first shot the whole time. Or even a whole period. Maybe it's only a minute of the first period. Maybe it's 3 minutes. You're taking that same shot. So later in the match, starting to develop, and we'd say condition a guy to feel a certain, attack or movement. And then that's when that misdirection type stuff starts to come into play. But we could probably hit a bunch of guys that are really good misdirection wrestlers too.
I'm sure it kind of almost reminds me of like boxing. You know what I mean? Like you jab all night. Why? To open up the right hand, which is what you really want, right? Will you see in a match? I kind of want to ask about this. I was not a misdirection wrestler. I didn't really have I didn't have the feel for it. So we talk about Oliver Molinaro. He fakes the high crotch. He hits him on the single. Do you find you can like set that up again later in the match, or once you hit it once, are guys kind of like wise to it now, and it's probably time to go to something else?
Well, that's the thing. If the guy's really good, generally speaking, he's gonna make an adjustment too. So maybe that's when we come into our single and come back across to our high crotch, or that's maybe when we fake our high crotch and he sprawls his feet all the way back because he thinks we're coming back single, and then maybe we have a snap down or a drag or a slide by. So other things are gonna open up depending on how big the toolbox is. Oliver has a pretty big toolbox. He knows a lot of stuff, so he throws a lot into the mix. I would say Molinaro is a little less in the toolbox. Very obviously Olympian, has had a great career, but just not the same as an Oliver on that side. His high C has obviously always been great. Some high level attacks, his chest locks. Molinaro has done some great things, but just a very different. Like you said, you didn't have a misdirection type of style. I would say that Frank, I don't think he has the similar attributes as an Oliver.
Yeah, he's kind of on the other end, right? And it's funny. You could have a really wide skill set, and then you could have one skill that's really deep, right? Where that is like it's like on Madden or something, where maybe you max out like one thing, but everything else is like a 20. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He still win Super Bowls, and Frank was
there's
in the Olympics. Unbelievable.
Back in the day, Jack Kubo. I don't know if you know the name. He was, but
Smart.
rap single. I mean, that's it. Rap single. National champ. He was pretty good. And that's what I was saying. You don't have to have 10 attacks. You have to have one that's really good, but you have to be able to set it up a million different ways. So your misdirection might be just your setup, just the way you're moving. You might know that you always want to get to a single, but how am I going to get there? What am I going to be doing? What kind of pressure am I putting? What kind of hand movement am I using? Am I catching hands? Am I grabbing elbows? Am I going to the collar? But your misdirection can come from purely a setup or a couple different setups to get to the same attack over and over and over as well.
Can your misdirection start to become a factor with your reattacks and with your defense as well? Because there's a lot of offensive wrestling we're talking. What about your counters and your defensive wrestling?
Yeah. Actually, I did some in the video with you guys as well, and it's similar. It's similar type stuff. Maybe the guy shoots, I block, and I got to go behind, and I ran to the left side. Then maybe we got into another exchange where, again, maybe I blocked. It was a pretty good shot, and I faked left. He thought I was going to run hard left. He moves. I change off back to the other side. Or, maybe that's where I'm going to really bounce his face off of the mat and kind of move a little bit. So there's misdirection all over the place. And it does, like I said, it doesn't have to be 100 different attacks. It can be one or two with just the setups. There's really the misdirection aspect of it. And on the defensive end, there's definitely options for misdirecting and just being tricky in there.
I totally agree. Mario, before we get out of here, I know you mentioned you have your own podcast. What's the name of your podcast and what do you talk about on there? Let's talk shop.
Okay, so it's called Wrestlers Watching Wrestling. And, my nickname has been the Shot Doctor. And, we've been kind of going into a lot of analyzing video. So I've been able to get on with friends and get on with a lot of high-level athletes. And really, we're watching their matches, and we're breaking them down. I'm asking them questions. They're kind of pointing out certain things. And I was doing a little bit. We kind of changed the format a little bit, so it's a bit shorter. But we were watching some matches of maybe someone they would compete against as well, and breaking it down from there, and then just seeing what their thought process is, and how they approach a match, how they approach this, or how they would approach their opponent, and does anything change if it's this guy versus this guy, or is it the same approach, but obviously it's going to change on a technical aspect because he's a different guy. So that's pretty much what we've been doing, and we'll be putting out some more pretty soon.
Very cool. As you look at all that you've done with that podcast, is there anything that you feel like has really surprised you or that you maybe didn't expect coming into it?
To be honest, I don't know if it wasn't anything I didn't expect, but what I really enjoy about it is we can watch the same exact match. Maybe you're watching it, I'm watching it, Jordan Barrett is watching it, let's say Coach Buxton is watching it, and
I feel a little silly being involved, but sure. I know what you mean. Yeah.
But we're all watching it, and there's going to be certain things I'm sure that we all would pick up, and we would all see. He's a righty lead. He's a lefty single. There's all small things you would pick up. But then, you're going to have a little bit of a different philosophy on this scenario. And maybe it's in on the single. Maybe it's I came up through the middle. And you're going to have a little bit of a different insight than I'm going to have. And Jordan Burroughs is going to have a little bit of different insight than Coach Buxton is going to have. And then, like we were talking about, just kind of putting everything together. You were talking about the Iranian. It's weird that I watch those guys as well, because it's a grinder, more of a pace and pressure style, but to learn from everybody and then piece it all together and branding of wrestling, like my type of wrestling, I think you have to and would want to speak to these kind of people and just hear what their thought process and what their minds are cooking up, because I know my mind's always going, and what else am I missing? Is there something I'm missing? Is it something I can add and help this guy or someone I'm training? And it's really, really fascinating to just get into the mind of people that are just the best at what they do.
Man, I totally agree. It's been a great part of this podcast, being able to just talk to you guys and get inside your heads with regards to learning wrestling is really amazing. Where can people listen? Where can people get a hold of your show? Or watch?
We just got it logged on Flow a little bit. So it's Wrestlers Watching Wrestling. And we've actually had a little bit of a hiatus, only because my buddy who helps us with some video, he's been working 7 days a week and like a maniac. And but his one job is now going to be finished for a while, so we'll be able to get a bunch of new content coming out soon. And we're pretty excited about it. So definitely check us out. We've been calling it the Shot Doc Radio, and it's Wrestlers Watching Wrestling. Where did the Shot Doctor name come from? It came from one of my kids a long time ago made like a little picture, and it was like an edit, and it just had me on, I think it was like a background of Rutgers, something. I'm in my stance in a singlet, and then he just had Mary Mason, the Shot Doctor. And because as a younger guy, I used to really only like to work on my feet. And as I'm getting older and learning more and more and more, you have to be able to wrestle all over the place. But it was just a name that kind of stuck. And I liked it because my dad used to play baseball, and he used to go to this guy, they called him the Hit Doctor, so it's like, he was the best. You think of a doctor, you think of someone who's great at what they do. You think that they've had a lot of schooling in what they've done, and it just kind of stuck. And as a brand, I think it's a good branding for the times where, we're in a kind of crazy time. And
sure. I love it. That kid was really good at branding.
You need a little bit of a prescription to win, right? To be great.
Perfect. So Mario, where can people get a hold of you? Where can people find you on social media, anything like that? And if you have any sponsors to thank, now might be a great time to do that as well.
No sponsors right now, just kind of doing things on my own at the moment. But you can find me, it's Shot Doc, and that's on, I think, Twitter and Instagram. And then if you just, obviously Facebook, you're just looking up Mario Mason, you could probably find it pretty easy.
Perfect. And for anybody who wants to find your series, Mario, they can search on fanaticwrestling.com for the Art of Misdirection Wrestling. They can also go to the show notes in this. Anybody that's listening to this as a podcast, and there will be a link directly to it, so you guys can go find it directly there. Mario, thank you so much. You've been so generous with your time. Hope to talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Thanks. Appreciate it.